let's welcome our panelists today, and please join us on the stage. Thank you so much. Thanks. So how can academia, industry, and the government collaborate to support the research and development efforts aimed at addressing environmental issues in urban areas like Boston?
I'll answer first. Not all these things I work on directly, but we have a lot of different grant and investment programs to support startups. So anything from the research stage, where we make investments at universities, where researchers are still sort of proving out concepts, and then the next level grant when folks are ready to do that first deployment and collect some data, do proof of concept in the field. We have grants that help complement federal funding, sort of matching funding to really encourage a climate tech ecosystem here. We also directly make investments in clean energy startups in Massachusetts. And there's other things we do too beyond that sort of direct support for the ecosystem, which is we do a lot of workforce development. I think as we'll talk, I expect more about during our conversation today, there's a big workforce need here in Massachusetts to hit our climate goals, and so that's a big focus of our organization. And I think a way that government can support industry is making sure there's that trained workforce that's ready to step in and meet our climate goals. And then finally, there's the team I'm on is looking for ways to accelerate decarbonization. So we do that across the major sources of emissions in our economy. The transportation team, I've tried to think of a few examples in Boston. We have funded a pilot for e-bike delivery in the Alston area with a lot of partnership with local businesses, and that's to cut down on traffic, congestion, pollution. So we'll give some seed funding and hope that it can take off. And we also support net zero grid goals. Another local example here, there was a new senior building built in the Roxbury neighborhood, and building code requires any large building like that is 50 units to have a backup generator. And they were the first. They wanted, they were all electric, and they wanted to see could they avoid having a gas backup generator, but it had never been done before. So Mass EC, my organization, was able to provide a grant to prove out the concept of having a battery plus the solar that's on their building act as the backup generator, and so kind of proof of concept, with government support to kind of do those first test cases, and then letting industry take off from there. And then just one last example, and I'm talking a lot, but in the work I do is around building decarbonization specifically, and so we're currently working on a pilot program for decarbonizing triple deckers, which is a very common housing typology here in Boston and the region. Mostly they were built around 100 years ago, so it's old technology. A lot of these buildings have seen transitions, maybe from coal to gas or oil in between. So it's not like these buildings have transitioned and been durable, but we're looking at how do we electrify them, make them a lot more energy efficient, and bring them into the 21st century. So those are just a few examples, but I think it's a really rich area.
The questions, since I think we're in the same domain. So regarding retrofitting the existing buildings, this Boston area, especially the Cambridge area, has lots of old buildings. So besides, what are the strategies that you are implementing to consume the building owners to retrofit their buildings, because there is a lot of upfront cost to change their systems or the way that, or to improve the building solution, the building envelopes. So how can the government or the community to persuade the people to do that, to take the initiative for the building retrofit? Or any challenges when you conducting such kind of projects? Thank you.
Yeah, there certainly are a lot of challenges. I know that might be another question we can go into more, but I think when a lot of work we're doing now in our building decarbonization team is thinking about setting up the tools to create a plan for the building owner. So it doesn't totally get it. Like what you were asking, how do you do that motivation? But we feel like the first step is making sure people have a plan in their hands of how they're going to decarbonize their buildings sort of at natural investment cycles, when they were going to replace the heating anyway, or they were going to redo windows or facade. You're making sure that sustainability is built into those decisions. So that gets at, leveraging those natural investment points. I think there's lots of building energy performance standards in Boston and Cambridge that are going to provide that motivation for people to take action, and then pairing that with strong incentives, finance options. We're also looking at ways to build a community of practice, both for larger buildings and of smaller contractors who work on smaller buildings. So those are a few ways. I also let others talk.
Actually, something to add to that. We are living in Somerville, and we've recently benefited from the Mass Saves program. It's a really good incentive for building retrofits. We had our whole home insulated at no cost to the residents, which is a fantastic incentive. It's not necessarily for every single building, but it's a great state-funded program where it was zero cost to the tenants and the owners. So Massachusetts has a lot of really good programs, I think, for making that happen.
Yeah, we just add one more thing to this whole conversation, and that is, how can Boston, given all the universities we have, and to your point about how can universities, companies, and government work together, is there a way to make Boston the cutting edge within the U.S., given all of the universities we have? And the fact that, from what you showed us in the slides, the mayor and the governor are both committed to promoting sustainability issues. Now, I'm imagining that some of the things you're talking about may be technologically not challenging, but administratively very complex and funding-wise challenging. So if you want to convert every building, it takes a lot of money to encourage people to do it. So then it becomes a money challenge, not a technological challenge. But there may also be ways in which Boston could be at the forefront technologically to do some of these things in more creative, more cost-efficient ways. Is there any such aspiration to make Boston the leading city in the U.S.? And there are models you can see in other countries where government, university, and companies have come together, and they use that to create competitiveness globally. So I just wanted to suggest that's part of the conversation. Back to you.
Well, I don't want to speak for them, but I think the current governor has publicly expressed the ambition for Massachusetts, to be that leading climate tech hub in the world, certainly in the country. There's a bill she's proposed to the legislature to provide more support, economic support, to companies that want to start and then grow here in Massachusetts. So I think there really is that ambition by the governor, certainly by the mayor too. I think, as you shared, a lot of focus on sustainability and how Boston can transform into that sustainable city. And I do think it is an exciting opportunity. As another example, in pilot programs we're running where we think about how do we decarbonize existing, small 1-2 unit buildings, we've partnered with some startups that are based here in Massachusetts that can help create that home energy plan. We're partnering with a startup that's based in Greentown Labs, where our current CEO at Mass Clean Energy Center used to run that clean tech incubator. We're partnered with another startup that uses LiDAR scanning to take a quicker measurement of the building and use that to calculate the heat load, so you can know what kind of heat pump or how much capacity you want for the heat pump. So I think those kinds of technical innovations, partnered with strong policy support, can be a really exciting combination.
So thank you so much for your comments, and also I believe everyone here, and I'm so glad to see. So this beautiful city we live in, we work, is a leading city in the country, particularly in the study, in the development, and application of clean technology. Okay, so I do have another general question to all panelists. So what do you think? So what the current challenges and barriers are in Boston? Is Boston facing achieving its energy sustainability goals?
So I think for the building sector, because I'm a building scientist, so the building sector in Boston, there is a lot of buildings which are more than 100 years old. So one of the challenges that is to retrofit those old buildings and the infrastructure of the city. So because of the old infrastructure of buildings, reduce the building energy consumptions, one of the very important crucial steps is to retrofit those old buildings so that make these buildings to be more energy efficient. Then after that, besides the passive design or make the building design is to be energy efficient, we should also considering the energy efficient systems, for example, more higher COP of HVAC systems, and also including some smart controls of the buildings so that the building is reducing the amount of energy requirements and make the buildings more well controlled and more energy efficient. And the building sector itself actually consumes 40% of energy. So if we can actually reduce the building sector energy consumptions, that can help contribute a lot to the energy reduction and decarbonization of the city. That's one.
Maybe I have one comment here, really quick comment. So as we all know, Boston is one of the oldest cities in the country, and also as you know, there are quite a few historical bridges and the buildings. So the old building retrofit actually is really important. And also want to share with you, so as a scholar or a professor, so I recently found out the Department of Energy, DOE, announced tens of hundreds of $million grants in supporting the retrofit. Okay, renovating the buildings, particularly for the roof industry. It's a really great.
I think in a slightly different vein, pretty unique problem for Boston is how high our cost of living is here. I mean, we're constantly amongst the highest cities in the country. So when there's a lot of incentives to say switch our energy mix to a more sustainable one focused on wind and solar, if those costs are not comparable, potentially lower than what we're using right now, getting people to actually voluntarily switch to more sustainable practices is a little bit difficult. But a lot of the things you're talking about, especially for building sustainability and lowering energy usage, for example, are just inherent in development. So there's challenges, but there's also good opportunities just inherent in a lot of these.
I'm getting outside my comfort zone, but I'm thinking, as one of the most developed countries, the U.S., has advantages in terms of university quality, for instance, but has disadvantage that we have too many old buildings with old technologies. So we have the legacy disadvantage. Newer countries who are industrializing and just starting on their journeys have the advantage of leapfrogging, and they can be very innovative and faster adopting new technologies that come by. Right. How can we turn this disadvantage we have in the US into an advantage? And then, which is another way of saying, can we find cleverer ways to do all this retrofitting, because we have so much need for doing it, but not do it in a sort of brute force way, but find creative ways. So that would be a kind of contribution that the developed countries can make, that the developing countries in the world cannot take. So any thoughts on especially new technologies?
I mean, there are technologies out there to retrofit these old buildings, but I think we are looking for exactly what you're suggesting of how can we do it more lower cost, more nimbly. I think there are some exciting companies here on the software side of doing scans of buildings. There's a startup here, Highland Park Technologies, that is looking at how you might retrofit some of these old wood frame buildings with bio-based external clad panel. So they're relatively early, but they would take a scan of the building and then in a factory kind of prefab these panels that use wood fiber insulation. We're trying to cut down on the embodied carbon that goes into our building materials, and then be able to relatively quickly make the building a lot more insulated. So I think they still have to prove that out, but that's a kind of solution that excites me as something you could really make a big difference in the energy use of an old building more quickly and more affordably than some of the solutions that are available today.
So I think the retrofitting of the buildings probably can be standardized in different stages based on the requirements of the building owner's targets. For example, your targets the upfront cost, or the carbon emission reduction, or the energy reduction, or the indoor environmental qualities. So based on different requirements of the occupants, we can standardize those different phases of the retrofitting of the buildings. So if you are want to reduce the energy as your prioritized targets, and probably, and you are free of this of the capital cost, probably we can do more for you. So there is one of the researches was done in Media Lab at MIT. I think they are creating some of the tools that, so based on the different requirements of the building occupants, we can set up the different retrofitting plans for different buildings specifically, based on your cost, your target cost, your target energy consumption, etc. So I think this actually can be standardized for different leases and for different building owners.
So next session, I will have a few specific questions to our panelists. And like I said, mentioned earlier, so I really expect you to hear some answers or comments from the panelists assigned, and also I'm expected to see, to hear more comments from other panelists. So the first specific question is to Ravi. As we all know, actually, you are founding director of the Center for Emerging Markets at Northeastern University. So what role can that center play in facilitating knowledge transfer and collaboration between developed and developing economies to promote sustainable development and address environmental challenges on the global scale?
As you know, this whole sustainability is a global challenge. It requires a global solution. No single country can solve this. And some of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases are the emerging markets. And the number one emitter is China, which now emits, I think, twice as much as the US. And number three is India, which is half as much as the US. Of course, both India and China have much larger populations, so on per capita they're still much lower than the US. But if you look at the headroom for growth, given their population, the per capita income is, in the case of India, about 1/20th or 1/30th that of the US. And in China, even with all of this growth, it's about a fifth that of the US. So they still have a lot of headroom for growth. That means they can produce a hell of a lot of greenhouse gases going forward. So I think if we think of this as a global problem, which it is, then we have to recognize that these countries are a major part of the problem. And I'm not saying it's all their fault, because most of the greenhouse gases are emitted by us. We have lights on here in this very bright room, to your point. So there's a lot, we consume per capita at very high amounts in the US. But the good news, I think, and this is one of the values, I think, of looking at emerging markets, is that they also are part of the solution, because they are embracing green technologies much more vigorously than the developed countries, partly because of the leapfrogging advantage that they're late to develop, and therefore they can include the greener technologies in a high proportion of their total requirements. So some of the highest users or producers of solar energy are in the emerging markets. If you look at the share of green technologies in the new energy produced for new sources of power plants and so on, the share of the green is very high in the developing countries. In China in particular, in solar, for instance, this is quite an amazing number. China's production of solar energy is more than that of the next 5 countries combined. And so that's the scale with which China is both a polluter in terms of greenhouse gases, it's a champion in that department, but it's also a champion in the adoption of green technology. So you have this paradox in the emerging markets, but they're also both a big part of the problem and also a big part of the solution. Therefore, it means that we can learn from their experiences, and the scale that China, for instance, or India brings to these sectors is good for the whole world. And I just mentioned one, to your point, of what can we learn from these countries. China is single-handedly brought down the cost of solar panels by about 80%, compared to what it was when it was mainly being produced in developed countries. This is not only because of cheap labor. People think it's all because of cheap labor, everything is cheap. No, it's a lot of innovation, process innovation, technological innovation in how you conduct various steps of the production process. And China now has a capacity equal to twice its own demand. That means China says we can supply the whole world, and that's part of the problem. It's creating trade challenges for the West. But if today solar energy is being adopted in many other countries in the world, it is because China has brought down the cost. Really, that's it. Otherwise, solar was not competitive with fossil fuels. Even now, despite all of the understanding of the importance of climate change and trying to prevent greenhouse gas emissions, the most powerful force pushing for green tech is the economics. If the economics were not there, it would take massive subsidies in order to make companies and countries adopt these technologies. So I think there's a lot of, and this is one example, but you can go down the line. You take EVs, you take electric vehicles, you take batteries, you take wind energy. In all of these areas, there's innovations coming out of these countries that we can, I call it reverse innovation. My own research is about how can we learn from the innovations in developing countries and bring them to other developing countries, but even bring them to the developed countries. I think there's a tremendous potential for doing that kind of reverse innovation in sustainability.
So when we talk about the clean technology, particularly in developing countries or undeveloped regions in developed countries, so we do see opportunities. But like you mentioned, currently China might be leading the solar energy installation, solar panel installation and capacity. So I just would like to share my personal comments. So I do not see any competition. It should not be a competition actually among all countries. It should be cooperation. And China, India, and United States, and some other countries, they are playing a important role for different sectors. So I do see, everyone will mutually benefit if we do cooperate together. Any other comments regarding this specific question? If not, I'm going to move on. So I will have next specific question to Matt. So how can the city ensure equitable access to clean energy resources and benefits for all residents, including underserved communities?
I appreciate that question, and I would say I've been at the Planck Energy Center for 9 years, and even over that amount of time, there's really been a lot of increased focus on this question, and I think a recognition that some of our early investments in the clean energy sector weren't felt equitably, that some of our subsidies for solar adoption went more to high-income households. So I think there's been an increased recognition, and that comes from certainly the staff at Mass EC, but also leadership in the state and the city, and now at the federal level. So just to give a couple examples of how that's translating in practice, we, in the last few years, have launched our Empower Massachusetts program, and that program is meant to fund community-based groups for any different kind of idea they have to promote equitable access to clean energy. One of the solutions that I'm excited to see developing is cooperatively owned solar with a community advisory board. So Mass CC gave a grant to help incorporate that solar cooperative and then help them develop their first solar development on a grocery store. So I'm excited. I think there's some opportunities with more distributed energy resources for more of the wealth from energy generation to be maintained in the communities where it's generated, if that's done correctly, and we can apply innovative business models. On transportation, we have programs that are specifically focused on equitable access to this clean energy transformation. We currently have a funding opportunity. We're looking for ideas to think about charging for, we call them garage orphans, so folks who don't have a garage, but may live in an apartment building or just on a street where there's no driveways, no garages. Where are they going to charge EVs if that becomes the norm? In our own, from the federal government, Massachusetts just received $156 million for a program called Solar for All to promote equitable solar access, both in ownership models, maybe lease to own for affordable housing, but also community solar if folks don't have their own roof where they can put solar. What are models where they can buy into solar arrays and still get that benefit from clean energy? And I think this mentality also sort of is imbued in all of our programs. I'm working on launching a program now. We're calling it the Home Modernization Navigator, sort of a hotline where you could call up and ask your questions. Okay, I'm thinking of getting an induction stove or a heat pump water heater, but I have this question. And we're preparing it to launch not here in Boston, but first in the cities of Springfield and Lowell. Those cities were selected by the state government because they have higher percentages of environmental justice communities, and they have been underserved by some of our clean energy programs. So we want to make sure that this Navigator program is designed from the beginning, thinking about how to serve those underserved communities. They have some higher percentages of folks that speak languages other than English, so making sure we think about language accessibility from the beginning. Low income, higher percentage of renters, there's a big sort of split incentive there, so making sure we're kind of being thoughtful about those from the beginning of program design, I think is an important step, and one that I do see the state government where I sit, but also I watch my colleagues in the city government here in Boston really thinking about those considerations from the beginning, and I'm excited to see that.
Okay, so great, thanks, Meg. And also, I want to thank MassEC. As we know, MassEC is really generous from a grant's point of view, from a grant perspective. And also, today we also have the CEO of a clean energy company, startup company, Planck Energies, Angel. So maybe you want to share some of the information that about Planck Energy and also the connection relationship between Planck Energy and also the grants from MassEC.
So I think it's a very warranted plug of MassEC here because we've been a huge investor from a lot of your programs. Actually, Nate in our audience is one of our engineers. He was brought on through MassEC's Clean Energy Internship Program. And as a very early stage startup, obviously we're always low in the funding department. So any sort of resources we can get to expand our workforce are just huge for us. I mean, we've doubled or tripled our output and our progress just because we have more hands. And I think it's also very beneficial because even if those students go back to school or they change states, they still have a lot of perspectives. They've learned about clean energy that they wouldn't have been able to have if not for these funding opportunities. I'm very much in favor of what MassEC has been doing for all the startups in Boston.
And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your product. I know some, but just if you could share where you are and how things are going.
Yeah, so the main product we're looking at right now is we're doing additives and products for cool roofs. And I will certainly talk about this with later questions, but the idea is put these coatings on the roof of your building, vehicles, even on building facades. And especially in the summer, especially in warm regions on a day like today, significantly lower your energy consumption without consuming any electricity. So that's mainly what we're looking at. It's a very passive approach to reducing your energy consumption, but we're also very focused on using very sustainable materials, biomaterials when we can, low VOC or no VOC, so we don't have those types of issues as well.
Thanks, Meg and Andrew. And also, as you have seen, actually, there's a table set aside for Planck Energy Technologies and also the products. So maybe after the panel, Andrew can introduce the technology and the products a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I have another specific question to Alex. So from an architectural perspective, so what innovative design strategies can be implemented to promote eco-friendly urban development in the city of Boston?
Thank you for the question. So basically, as a building scientist, to approach for designing new ultra-efficient energy buildings, we have normally three steps. The first one we're approaching with passive design strategies. For example, we should have a very well-insulated building envelopes so that we can reduce the heat loss or the heat gain from the outward environment. And also, we should have a proper designing of the shading device. For example, we have very large glass facade, or we have very large window-to ratio in your buildings. Then there is a large portion of the materials of glass. Glass is it's very high conductivity, so there is a lot of heat that can be gained from the glass during the summertime. Also, there is lots of heat that can be lost from your glass area. So how can we properly design this shading lens or the shading device to block the undesired sunlight during the summertime, which can help us to reduce the heat cooling loads during the summer. So that's one of the passive design strategies. And also, we should another passive design strategy is that we should enforce the natural resources, for example, the daylight, the natural ventilations. So all of these natural resources could help us to reduce the building energy consumption. For example, during the shoulder seasons, when the outdoor environment is very comfortable, so we should off our HVAC systems and just open the windows to bring the outdoor airs, which are very comfortable and low CO2 concentrations as well. So besides all these passive design strategies, then we move to the second step, which is active design strategies, which is to properly design your HVAC systems. So for the Boston, I think there is a very dominant winter and summer area, so we need both heating and cooling. So probably HVAC systems, we could consider higher COP HVAC or energy starved HVAC systems, which can help us reduce energy consumptions from the HVAC itself. And also, for example, in other climates, for example, the tropical climates in Singapore, I think they are currently implementing the mixed mode of ventilation, meaning that they are using normal HVAC systems, but also integrate with a fan, and the high volume, low speed fan. So the fan, when the fan runs, they actually our bodies that have the evaporation of the sweat. So actually, when we have the fan, when we feel the wind, our body sensations of the temperature will be lower by 1 to 2 Celsius degree. So when we have this mixed mode of the mixed mode of ventilation with fans as well as the normal HVAC systems, the set point for the thermostat can be reduced. When we reduce the set point for the HVAC systems, meaning that we no need to produce such kind of cool air. For example, the normal cool air we need to provide is like 22 Celsius or 23 Celsius, so that to make the indoor environment to be comfortable. For example, but when we have the fans there to have this kind of mixed mode, we probably just need to set our set point to be 25, which means that your HVAC system can reduce a loss of energy from that perspective of having mixed mode of ventilation. Then after that, so we have the passive design to reduce the energy demand from the building. Then we have the active design for the energy efficient HVAC systems. Then the third step will be the energy generation on site, which is to offset the energy consumptions that you consume in the building. So with all these three steps together, the buildings can be more energy efficient and more comfortable to living in the indoor space. And that is one portion for the building scale. Then when we're looking at the urban scale, so all the buildings should be working together to be more energy efficient, and all the buildings should not just like one building to be net zero, but a community level or urban level. So all the buildings should working together to achieve our carbon neutrality goals. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
What opportunities do you see for clean energy companies in Boston to contribute to cities' sustainable energy goals and drive innovation in the sector?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I think there's a lot of problems from global warming and climate change that are felt across the board, but there's certainly problems in Boston and urban areas specifically that can be pertinent for clean energy startups and companies to address. One of the biggest ones is, I would say, especially pertinent to our technology, is the urban heat island effect, which you may have heard in the news recently, where urban areas, because they have green space, highly absorbing materials, partially due to the emissions from vehicles, end up being very significantly warmer than the surrounding areas. If you go outside of the city, it'll be a lot cooler. And even though we view Boston in the Northeast sometimes as a particularly cool area, it is certainly something that still affects us. One of our interns told us that she has colleagues studying the urban heat island effect as far north as Montreal. So just because we're up in the Northeast and it's not hot year-round, it certainly doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us. So that is a particular problem that I think we can attack it from so many different ways. We can, obviously, we've been talking a lot about buildings, rightfully so. Things like cool roof technology can be really beneficial for that. But also just choosing the right materials for roads and buildings to absorb a little bit less. Another problem that's pertinent to that, but also just health in general, is emissions and air pollution around cities. This is another kind of multifaceted problem that I think can benefit from so many different kinds of innovation. We can think about EVs and less air pollution for urban areas, but we can also think about how we can make our public transit system more effective, more robust, so that people can rely on alternative forms of transportation just to reduce emissions. So I think there's a lot of different problems that we can attack at so many different ways, from logistics innovation and technological innovation, and even policy-related innovation.
Thanks, Andrew. So at last, I will have one last general question to all panelists. That will be so how can Boston leverage its unique strengths and resources to become a global leader in urban sustainability and climate action?
Yeah, I want to add one angle to that discussion, and that is the role of the rest of the world. You can do the innovating in Boston, but the applications could be in other parts of the world. And that is something that increasingly, as we become intertwined globally, something companies should be thinking about. And there's a couple of facts that I think help to see the opportunity outside the US. US is, I believe, 83 or 85% urban population. We're already highly urbanized. If you go to China, it's about 2/3 of the population lives in urban areas. If you go to India, it's 1/3 of the population lives in urban areas, 2/3 live in rural areas. And the expectation is in the next few decades, countries like India, and think of Africa, think of many countries all over Latin America, where urbanization rates are low, they are going to become highly urbanized over the next few decades. So they need to learn all of these lessons and apply them as soon as possible, and not wait for the ideas to be applied in the US and then they wait 10 years afterwards to find out about them, and then it takes another 10 years to do it. In those countries, you lose 20 or 30 years normally in the old way of operating. We need to speed that up and compress it so that the innovations, the technological capabilities can be here, but the magnitude of the problems is much greater in the developing world. So how can we take the expertise here and apply it? I'll give one example. We try to do some of that in my center, but MIT does a very good job. They have something called the Tata Center. And it's really challenging engineers, scientists working in the US and who are at MIT to address problems which are in other parts of the world. And that's a very nice thing that we can do these days. And also it's very motivating for young engineers. They want to solve the big problems of the world, rather than tweaking the problems in where they are. They're very open to going to Africa, going to Asia, and other countries to help bring their knowledge and their innovations and apply them. So to your paint idea, for instance, and we have talked about this before, the opportunities could be enormous. So the world is our oyster, should be our oyster.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a great point. And not only for our paint technology, like you mentioned, but something else that we have been paying a lot of attention to is water purification technologies. And we take it for granted in Boston, especially in the Northeast, because we have so many great sources of water up here. Nobody really hits drought season, but even in California or overseas, I mean, you have so many people being sick and dying because they don't have access to water. And I think it's a good point about modifying our perspective to make sure we don't just solve the problems we have at home. We're in a unique position where we can really benefit everybody else because we have a leg up currently.
Yeah, I appreciate this discussion a lot. I think working for state government, I often take the perspective of how can we be the best, and we'll attract the most startups and have them stay and grow in Massachusetts, and we still want that for our state, but I think, as this conversation is highlighting, it's also incumbent on us, if we do want that, to think about what's the sort of diplomacy to the world to see these solutions scale globally. We want them to scale here in Boston and Massachusetts and help us solve our climate problems, but we also, if we want to be global leaders, need to think about how to kind of help that leapfrogging and help make sure that innovations that happen here, thanks to all the great universities and research institutions we have, really can spread quickly, and also the research questions that we're tackling here are the right ones and are applicable to some of the global problems. So I really appreciate the conversation.
So I totally agree. Boston is renowned for the world-renowned university. So there is lots of technologies, innovations happening here, but definitely we can apply to other countries in the world. So I know there is ongoing research projects between the governments in Indonesia. It's a Makassar city in Indonesia and the Penn State University. So they are doing a net zero carbon cities, the community level, and with the Makassar city government in Indonesia. So they are going to renovate all the building roofs with PV panels, see how those PV panels working together can generate the energies to offset the community level energy consumption. So, but the research is based in the US, but the application is in Indonesia. I think this kind of collaborations between universities and the government in other parts of the world should be encouraged.
Well, thank you so much for all panelists on answering this question. And also, I really like the point Ravi just raised regarding there exists a gap between technologies and applications. So how do we actually fill the gap? So how do we actually really remove this mismatch between the applications and the technologies? That's just something we need to work all together. And also that's why we meet today, because we have the panelists from different industry, state-owned government, and also university, academia, and company. So really happy to see everyone here today, and thanks for joining this panel. So next, I would like to take some questions from the audience, if there's any.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I'd like to ask a question that thanks to the Massachusetts. I know there's a huge progress in the Massachusetts, not also progress, and I saw.
Can you speak up just a little bit, like it's quiet?
Oh yes, sorry. Yes. I saw that 20 years ago there's just 10% non-fossil energy in Massachusetts, but right now it's about 21, more than 21, or 10% in the last 20 years. So big progress. And in the future, we know that with AI can have a lot of energy and energy supply and demand. I like this, I like Professor Yi is that it's not a logic challenge, it's a money challenge. And also it's also a behavior challenge. I like this slide, the slide that we can lost energy because there's some here. We know there should be that and not even do that because there's different logic in reality, like the government, like the department. So I mean, because the AI have a larger technology help us to detect different pattern people's behavior. Like Facebook, we know everywhere other behavior. So this is some challenge like he said. In the future, maybe we can use something to have different, different ownership unit. They have different behavior. Someone like to do that, someone don't like to do that. So we can have match which one would like to do tax return to become more future. Then use that benefit of our tax return that we can get back to the different company who can join us because we cannot ROI and return interest investment. They can know which one I would like because we know different behavior, different ownership building. So I want to just maybe you have some plan future about that based on AI technique to help us to protect us. Yeah, thank you.
And so I think as you're identifying, it's a multifaceted challenge. For clean energy, I haven't talked yet, but an opportunity I'm excited to see here in this region is offshore wind. And that I think will really significantly contribute to the clean energy on the electric grid of Massachusetts, which also then contributes to our goals of electrifying buildings and transportation. I think you're flagging challenges around changing behavior, high costs. Like I said earlier, I don't have a silver bullet yet, but I think there may be no silver bullet, but sort of a silver buckshot of trying to hit our goals with lots of different strategies. So there are new loan products coming on about how folks might be able to take loans out. There's requirements in the city of Boston to think about reducing emissions from buildings, which I think will really drive change and drive innovation. One thing our organization I think I mentioned it briefly, but we're hoping to stand up, we're calling it tentatively Building Performance Exchange, and really working with the industry owners, developers, property managers, but also architects and engineers around decarbonizing existing large buildings and how, sort of building that community of knowledge and practice to get to the place where, you're operating your buildings as efficiently as possible. I also, Alens, I don't know if you want to jump in. I think the questions too about thinking about avoiding having lights, or just sort of using all the technology we have to kind of optimize our buildings, I know is central to your research.
Okay, thank you, Meg. So back to your question, actually, this fantastic questions. So basically, every one of us has a different behaviors and our own preference regarding the thermal comfort indoors. So the AI actually can help us to just build a model for your personalized, comfortable indoor environment. And the AI models can learn that, okay, what do you think about the comfortable indoor environment? What should I set for the thermostat? And should I off the lights because you are working, target illuminance of the text level should be 300 lux, and we sense that the lux level is sufficient, so we should just off the lights. So the AI models can learn your own preference, regarding the comfortable indoor environment. Then the AI models that can be integrated with all of these systems. So that now we have the IoT sensors and all of these smart systems, the lightings, HVACs, or even the shading itself can be a dynamic, so it can be controlled. The AI models can just be integrated with all of these systems together, and the system can be controlled based on the model's prediction regarding your own preference of comfortable environment. And that's how we normally can solve the energy efficient based on the personal preference as well as your human behavior. But this is a very challenging topic because every one of us thinking different. We have different recognition of a comfortable environment, and we have different behaviors. So that's why now we have lots of research. They are doing like displacement coolings, meaning that the cooling, the diffusers are coming from the floors, and at every desk in the office, they have your own distributors on the floors, and that diffusers will learn your own preference models. So every diffusers have their own models that target for yourself. Then the thermostat can be changed based on your own preference. So each one of these diffusers are individually controlled. So these are very challenging but very interesting applications of the AI plus sufficient buildings. Yeah.
Thanks for this question, and also just 1 second. So it's reminded me actually of one of the research we have done in our lab, Planck Energy lab. So that is about actually smart control of infrastructure building. So we published paper last year. So we designed actually a smart thermostat that's completely controlled actually not by human being, then by humidity, temperature, and preset actually the conditions by human being. So if that's the case, this can achieve the energy saving for individual buildings and also for the whole community. Yeah, thanks.
Question. I don't need a mic. Yeah. Thank you for the panelists. So I want to follow up about the HVAC question. I know the Massachusetts is heavily invested on electrification on the buildings, so all the gas-powered heat system changes to HVAC. All the new buildings are required to have the heat pump system. And then the one thing I really worry about is the winter is extremely cold, and one natural disaster, a big snowstorm, knock out some power line, and then there will be outage for all the houses. And then how does the state deal with the outage when there's no electricity for the heat pumps? And how the state going to deal with this type of issue?
Happy to start there.
Yeah.
So just to make sure everyone heard, a question was about as we electrify buildings, how do we think about challenges where there might be winter peaks, especially if there's natural disasters in the winter? And I think there are questions certainly about both sort of winter peak where you now are doing heating on the electric system, and we're currently a summer peaking on the electric system, and it becomes winter peaking. But then I think you were highlighting even in more extreme disaster situations. One thing I want to point out up front is that most fossil fuel heating systems currently require electricity to operate, sort of at least at the small residential level. So we're in a situation now where if power goes out, most people don't have heating, even if they were heating with fossil fuels. But I think as we expect more natural disasters from climate change, this is a good question to think about. And we don't have all the answers, but I think people are working on this. And one of the solutions that I'm excited about, what I mentioned briefly at the beginning for this new, I think this actually building captures two of the solutions that I'm excited about. And one is thinking about, and Ellen's brought this up, passive construction, thinking about designing buildings that are well insulated so that even in extreme weather, they'll hold their temperature for several days. So, you lose the power from a hurricane, but the building can maintain a comfortable temperature for a couple days just because it's well insulated so it doesn't heat up or cool down as fast. So I think thinking about passive strategies where we can make our built environment resilient to losing electricity in emergency situations is exciting, and I think especially exciting because it has so many other benefits. The highly energy efficient buildings have so many other benefits. But I was thinking about this building, 50 units of senior housing that was just built in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. So it's passive house standard, which means it's very energy efficient, has that really well insulated envelope, and should be able to maintain a comfortable temperature for a couple days without any power if it came to it. But it also has battery backup paired with its own solar system, and that is designed so that it's robust enough to provide emergency use. So it's not going to keep the whole building up in that situation, but it should provide lights in the halls, some kind of emergency cooling, just what the building operators deem their most crucial loads. In that case, where there's a lot of senior citizens, making sure folks have access to cooling for their medicines, if applicable, or electricity for medical supplies. Those kind of key uses. So I think as we electrify, certainly thinking about resilience is top of mind and something we want to design in from the beginning.
More microgrids.
Microgrids are another area, I think, and that relates to also opportunities sort of for local distributed energy resources to really benefit local communities. Yeah. Any others want to chime in?
Thanks. Thanks for the question, and thanks, Meg. Another question?
So this is maybe primarily for Meg, but anyone can definitely answer and add some insight. We're really lucky here in Massachusetts and Boston to have the leadership like of Governor Healy and Mayor Wu to support these programs and to have the Mass CEC be so active in our community. How does the Mass CEC and the government and even other startups help to usher this model to more cities and have this kind of model that seems to work so well for our city, work for other people both across the US and even globally?
I don't know if I had the full answer, so others can chime in, certainly globally, but a couple things that spring to mind for me. Our current CEO of the Mass Clean Energy Center was the former CEO of Greentown Labs, which is a clean energy and climate tech incubator in Somerville, Massachusetts. And under her leadership, it expanded to Houston to have an office there. And I think the unique strength they were really leveraging in Houston was all the oil and gas expertise there. And some of those same exact skills, sort of world cutting edge engineering skills that are currently being applied to the fossil fuel extraction in that area are really applicable to clean energy solutions. So I think it's sort of thinking about what are the unique strengths of different parts of the country and different parts of the world, unique challenges and unique strengths, and making sure that we can be harnessing the creative potential and the knowledge of all different parts of the country and world. I think there's some exciting opportunities coming out of the federal government now that really are encouraging manufacturing in, we're starting to see big battery plants in West Virginia, and with some of these incentives, any state in the country would benefit from those incentives to scale up clean energy in all parts of the country, and just that Texas and Iowa are the nation leaders here in this country in terms of wind deployment, just because there is a great resource there. So I think being aware of what resources, both culturally and knowledge and natural resources exist in different areas, and leveraging those to the greatest extent possible. But I'll turn it over to some of my co-panelists. Ravi, if you have something of global perspective.
It's a little different from the question you're asking, which is how can you take. Yeah, how can you take innovations from here and spread it across the U.S., right? That's where Massachusetts may be more progressive or more innovative. And the wrinkle I want to add is, we also should be asking what innovations can we bring to Boston from other parts of the world? Because there's a lot of innovation happening in these industries in other places. And one of the advantages that, again, I go to the emerging markets, because the reason I go to the emerging markets is they have 85% of the world's population. They have half the world's GDP. They have 2/3 of the world's GDP growth. That's the reality today. So they are very important part, should be a very important part of our thinking. And they are also very innovative. And the assumption that all great innovations happen in the developed countries is not true. A lot of great innovations happen in the developed countries, but there are more and more good innovations happening in strange places. As many of you may know, the mobile payment was pioneered in Kenya. You would not have expected these kinds of things to happen. They are much more advanced with e-payments than we are in the US. I carry cash. Even now, I carry credit cards, right? But you go to China or India, everyone's using paying through their phone. So they're leapfrogging, and therefore, and they have the capacity to innovate. They have a lot of smart people, and they have very good universities as well and technical talent. And they're also trying to solve some of these same issues. The advantage they have over us is because they're much poorer than us, many of their solutions are ultra cheap. And it's not only cheap, as I said before, because their labor is cheap. It's cheap because people cannot afford expensive solutions. So there's enormous pressure on local players to come up with affordable solutions. And so their solutions are going to be much, much cheaper than our solutions. And I'm going to digress a little bit to an area where I've done some research on healthcare. An open heart surgery in any of these great hospitals in the US will cost you $100,000 to $300,000, depending on how the insurance is set up with the hospital. There's a hospital in India that does surgery at the same level, with the same level of outcomes, for $2,000. It's nowhere close to the cost, and it's not explained by cheaper labor and so on. So that's because $2,000 is the average per capita income of India. So it's like saying even at that level it's very expensive. And the doctor who's pioneered this hospital and produced these innovations wants to bring it down to $800 because he thinks $2,000 is too expensive. Now, is there something we can learn from there to bring down our healthcare costs? Absolutely. Now, the same thing is going to be true in sustainability as well. So, just as we want to innovate here to solve their problems, we want to be open to their innovations and bring them back and apply it. Because this is a global problem. Let's put our, as you said, let's put all our heads together. I know it's hard to do in today's world, but really, that's a missed opportunity if we are not able to do it. But I think we should pursue that avenue as well.
A quick point to add here too. I think both of these panelists have made very great points on this question where we're talking about kind of emphasizing the strengths of these new regions, right? What they're already kind of doing. And it feels very similar to when we're talking about making buildings more passive, for example. It's almost like we want our approach to be a little bit more passive, where we get minimal resistance. We're using the resources we already have, kind of adapting them to the unique climate and infrastructure capabilities of the new places as we try to expand.
Okay, so thanks everyone. So at the end, actually, please allow me to deliver the closing remarks. So as our panel draws to a close, so I'm so filled actually with of hope and determination today. So we've witnessed the power of cooperation, exchange of ideas, and commitment to action in our beloved city of Boston. So from the insightful perspectives shared by our panelists, the business professor, architect, CEO of clean tech company, and the director of Mass CEC, and to the engagement of our audience today, it's evident that Boston is poised to lead the way in environmental stewardship. As we reflect on the discussions held today, let us carry forward the momentum generated in this room. Together, let's embark on a journey of sustainability, resilience, and innovation. So let's embrace the challenges ahead as opportunities for growth and transformation. And let's reaffirm our commitment to safeguarding our planet for generations to come. So on behalf of Boston Urban Forum, I extend my deepest gratitude to our panelists, our audience, and everyone who have contributed to making this event a success. So thank you everyone, and a happy World Environment Day. Thank you so much.